I said no to Cormac during the mating ceremony, and he made me regret every breath I took afterward. The whip carved rivers of fire across my back while the entire pack watched in silence. I couldn't walk for 3 days. I couldn't sleep without screaming. And the worst part, everyone said I deserved it for defying an alpha's claim. But they didn't know what I knew. They didn't know the secret that would destroy everything. If you want to hear how I survived what came next and finally brought Cormac to his knees, stay until the very end of this story, because the revenge I got was so brutal, so perfectly calculated, that it changed our pack forever. And before we continue, tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug. Drop it in the comments right now. I read every single one. My name is Aisling, and I should probably start by explaining how I ended up standing in that ceremonial circle with blood running down my legs and hatred burning in my chest. The mating ceremony happens once every 5 years in our pack. It's supposed to be sacred, a beautiful tradition where alphas and omegas are paired by the moon goddess herself through signs and instincts that can't be denied. The entire pack gathers in the ancient stone circle that our ancestors built centuries ago, and when the full moon reaches its peak, the alpha wolves step forward to claim their chosen mates. I was 23 years old, and I'd known for months that Cormac had his eyes on me. Cormac O'Sullivan was our pack's strongest alpha after his father, the pack leader Finian. He was built like a warrior from the old stories, all muscle and dominance and that commanding presence that made even other alphas lower their eyes. His hair was black as a raven's wing, his eyes the color of storm clouds, and when he walked into a room, everyone felt it. Most of the unmated females in our pack would have killed for his attention. But I wasn't most females. I'd grown up hearing the stories about Cormac. How he'd killed 3 rogues with his bare hands when he was 16. How he'd challenged his own uncle for disrespecting his mother and left the man scarred for life. How he took what he wanted and destroyed anyone who stood in his way. The pack elders praised his strength, his ruthlessness, his unwavering loyalty to pack law. But I'd also heard the other stories. The ones whispered late at night when people thought no one was listening. About Cormac's previous girlfriend, Niamh, who'd left the pack suddenly 3 years ago and never returned. About the bruises she'd tried to hide. About the way she'd flinched whenever he raised his voice. My best friend Siobhan had been close to Niamh, and she'd told me things that made my blood run cold. So when Cormac started showing interest in me 6 months before the ceremony, when he started appearing wherever I was, when he started making it clear to every other alpha that I was his intended mate, I felt trapped. Because in our pack, you don't refuse an alpha's claim. Especially not the son of the pack leader. Especially not someone as powerful as Cormac. But I had a secret that made refusing him absolutely necessary. His name was Dara. Dara Quinn was everything Cormac wasn't. He was a beta, which meant he ranked lower in the pack hierarchy. But he was kind and gentle, and he made me laugh until my sides hurt. We'd been meeting in secret for over a year. Stolen moments in the forest, late-night conversations under the stars, touches that promised forever. He was an artist who carved the most beautiful wooden sculptures, and he'd made me a wolf pendant that I wore hidden beneath my clothes, pressed against my heart. We'd planned to run away together after the ceremony. We had money saved, a car waiting, a new life mapped out in a city 300 miles away where pack law couldn't reach us. All I had to do was get through the ceremony without being chosen. But Cormac made sure that was impossible. The night of the ceremony was unseasonably cold for June. I remember standing in the crowd of unmated females, all of us wearing the traditional white ceremonial dresses, while the alphas gathered on the opposite side of the stone circle. The full moon hung massive and silver above us, and the ancient stones seemed to pulse with old magic. Pack leader Finian stood at the center of the circle, his silver hair gleaming in the moonlight. He raised his arms and began the ritual words that had been spoken for generations. The ceremony was beautiful in its way, all flickering torches and ancient chants and the electric energy of wolves recognizing their fated mates. One by one, alphas stepped forward to claim their chosen partners. I watched Siobhan be claimed by an alpha named Brendan, saw the joy and terror mixed in her eyes as she stepped forward to accept his mark. 2 more pairings happened, both met with cheers and celebration from the gathered pack. And then Cormac stepped into the center of the circle. The crowd went silent. Everyone knew this was the moment they'd been waiting for. Cormac O'Sullivan, the most eligible alpha in the pack, was finally choosing his mate. I felt every eye turn toward me because everyone knew. The whole pack had been gossiping about it for months. Some of the other unmated females looked relieved that they wouldn't be chosen. Few looked jealous. I looked across the crowd and found Dara's eyes. He was standing with the other betas, and even from that distance I could see the panic on his face. We'd talked about this possibility. We'd made our plans. But now that the moment was here, everything felt terrifyingly real. Cormac's voice rang out across the circle, deep and commanding. I claim Aisling Brennan as my mate under the witness of the Moon Goddess and this pack. Step forward, Aisling, and accept my mark. It wasn't a request. It was an order. And every single person in that circle expected me to obey. I stood frozen for a moment that stretched into eternity. I could feel the weight of all those eyes on me. I could feel my mother's desperate hope because being mated to Cormac would elevate our entire family's status. I could feel the pack's expectation pressing down on me like a physical force. And then I looked at Cormac, really looked at him, and I saw what I'd always seen beneath the handsome face and powerful presence. I saw cruelty. I saw ownership. I saw a future where I would become exactly like Niamh, wearing bruises and excuses, trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape. So I did the unthinkable. Said no. I cannot accept your claim, Cormac O'Sullivan. I refuse this mating. The words came out stronger than I'd expected. Clear and loud enough for everyone to hear. And the reaction was immediate. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone's mother actually screamed. I saw pack leader Finian's face go dark with fury. And Cormac's expression transformed from confident dominance to something absolutely terrifying. He crossed the circle toward me in 3 long strides, moving so fast I barely had time to react. His hand locked around my arm like an iron shackle, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. What did you just say? His voice was barely above a whisper, but everyone heard it in the shocked silence. I said no. I was shaking now, but I forced myself to meet his eyes. I don't accept your claim. I don't want to be your mate. His grip tightened until I thought my bone might crack. You don't refuse an alpha's claim, Aisling. That's not how this works. I'm refusing now. For a moment I thought he might strike me right there in front of everyone. But then pack leader Finian's voice cut through the tension. Cormac, release her. Now. Cormac let go of my arm, but he didn't step back. He stood there radiating fury while his father approached. Finian looked at me with disappointment and barely contained rage. Aisling Brennan, do you understand what you've just done? Refusing an alpha's rightful claim is one of the gravest offenses against pack law. It's an insult not just to Cormac, but to this entire pack and the traditions we hold sacred. I understand, I said, though my voice was shaking now. But I cannot mate with someone I don't love. That has to count for something. Love. Finian's laugh was harsh. This isn't about love, child. This is about pack strength, about bloodlines, about maintaining the order that has kept us safe for generations. Your feelings are irrelevant compared to the good of the pack. Then maybe pack law is wrong. The moment those words left my mouth, I knew I'd gone too far. The crowd's reaction went from shocked to actively hostile. I heard people shouting, calling me selfish, calling me a disgrace. My own mother was crying. Cormac's smile was terrifying. She doesn't understand what she's saying, father. She's confused, overwhelmed by the ceremony. Let me take her somewhere private to discuss this, and I'm sure she'll come to her senses. No. I backed away from him. I'm not confused. I know exactly what I'm saying. I will not be your mate, Cormac. Not now, not ever. And then I did something even more stupid. Ran. I shifted mid-stride, my wolf bursting through as I bolted for the forest beyond the stone circle. I heard shouting behind me, heard Cormac's roar of rage, but I didn't stop. I ran like my life depended on it because maybe it did. I made it about 2 miles before they caught me. 6 alphas, including Cormac, surrounded me in a clearing and forced me to shift back to human form. I stood there naked and shaking while they formed a circle around me, cutting off any escape. Cormac stalked toward me, and I'd never seen anyone look so furious. "You humiliated me," he said softly. "In front of the entire pack, you embarrassed me. Made me look weak. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I told the truth," I said. "I don't want to be with you." "That doesn't matter. You don't get to choose. I chose you, and that means you're mine. I'm not anyone's. I'm my own person." He moved faster than I could track, his hand closing around my throat, lifting me until my toes barely touched the ground. I clawed at his arm, gasping for air. "You're going to learn a very painful lesson about defiance," he said. "And everyone is going to watch." They dragged me back to the stone circle. The pack was still gathered there, waiting, and when they saw me being hauled back naked and struggling, some people looked away in shame. But most just watched with dark curiosity to see what would happen to someone who broke sacred law. Pack leader Finian stood in the center of the circle, and next to him was something that made my blood turn to ice. A whipping post that I'd never seen before had been erected in the center of the ceremonial space. It was old wood, dark with age and stained with what I realized with horror was blood from previous punishments. "Aisling Brennan," Finian announced to the gathered pack, "you have committed a grave offense against our laws and traditions. You have refused a rightful alpha claim, insulted the son of your pack leader, and attempted to flee your punishment. For these crimes, you will receive discipline as prescribed by ancient law. 50 lashes with the ceremonial whip, to be administered by the alpha you rejected." 50 lashes. The words didn't seem real. People didn't survive 50 lashes. This wasn't discipline, it was execution. "No," I whispered. "Please no." But they were already binding my wrists to the post, stretching my arms above my head, positioning my naked back toward the crowd. I was completely exposed, completely vulnerable, and I'd never been more terrified in my life. I searched the crowd desperately for Dara and found him being held back by 2 larger betas. His face was twisted with anguish, and I could see him struggling to get to me, but they held him firmly in place. I wanted to tell him to run to save himself, but I couldn't find my voice. Cormac walked around to face me, and he was holding the ceremonial whip. It was an ancient thing, leather and metal, designed specifically to cause maximum pain to werewolf flesh that normally healed quickly from ordinary wounds. "I'm going to enjoy this," he said quietly, so only I could hear. "I'm going to make you scream until you can't remember your own name. And when I'm done, when you're broken and bleeding and can't stand on your own, you're still going to be mine. Because that's what you are, Aisling. You always have been, you just didn't know it yet." "I hate you," I whispered. "You'll learn to love me. Or at least to fear me. Either works." He stepped behind me, and I heard the whip crack through the air as he tested it. The sound alone made me flinch. Around me, the pack watched in silence. This was pack justice, pack law, and no one would intervene. The first strike hit like lightning made of pure agony. I couldn't stop the scream that tore from my throat as the whip opened a line of fire across my back. The ceremonial whip was designed to prevent rapid healing, to make the pain last, and it worked perfectly. The second strike crossed the first, creating an X of absolute torture. Tears were already streaming down my face. By the 5th strike I was begging. By the 10th, I couldn't form coherent words anymore, just animal sounds of pain. By the 20th, I was barely conscious, held up only by the bonds around my wrists. Cormac didn't hold back. Every strike was delivered with full alpha strength, with precision designed to maximize suffering without quite killing me. My back was a shredded mess of blood and torn flesh. I could feel it running down my legs, pooling on the ground beneath me. Somewhere around the 30th strike, I stopped screaming. I didn't have the strength left. I just hung there, a broken thing, waiting for death or unconsciousness, whichever came first. And through the haze of pain I heard someone shout, "Stop! Stop it, you're killing her." It was Dara. He'd broken free from the men holding him and was running toward the circle. I tried to warn him, tried to tell him to run the other way, but I couldn't make my voice work. Cormac stopped mid-swing and turned to face this new threat. "Ah," he said, and there was horrible understanding in his voice. "The beta. I should have known there was someone else. Is this who you thought you'd run away with, Aisling? This weak, pathetic beta? Leave him alone," I managed to croak out. "He has nothing to do with this." "Oh, I think he has everything to do with this." Cormac dropped the whip and walked toward Dara with predatory intent. "You touched what's mine. You poisoned her mind against me. You made her think she could refuse an alpha's claim." "She's not property," Dara said, "and I loved him for his courage even as I feared for his life. She has a right to choose her own mate." "No," Cormac said simply. "She doesn't. And you're about to learn what happens to betas who forget their place. What happened next will haunt me for the rest of my life." Cormac challenged Dara right there. An alpha challenge that no beta could hope to win. It should have been against the rules, but pack leader Finian did nothing to stop it. The pack formed a circle around them, and I was forced to watch from where I hung, bound and bleeding. The fight lasted less than 3 minutes. Dara was brave and quick, but he was no match for an alpha in his prime. Cormac toyed with him at first, letting him land a few hits, making him think he had a chance. And then Cormac ended it with brutal efficiency. He broke Dara's arm first. I heard the bone snap, heard Dara's scream. Then his leg. Then his ribs, one after another, methodical and terrible. And through it all Cormac talked. "This is what happens when you reach above your station. This is what happens when you touch an alpha's mate. This is what happens when you forget that there are consequences for breaking pack law." When Cormac finally tired of the beating, he stood over Dara's broken body and delivered his final judgment. "You are banished from this pack, beta. If you're ever seen in our territory again, I'll finish what I started tonight. Now crawl away before I change my mind." Dara couldn't crawl. He couldn't even move. 2 of the pack healers eventually came forward to drag him to the edge of pack territory, and I never saw him again. I later learned he survived, barely, and left for the city we'd planned to escape to together. Without me. After Dara was gone, Cormac returned to finish my punishment. The remaining 20 lashes were delivered with even more viciousness than before, and by the time he was done, I was unconscious. I woke up 3 days later in a small room that I didn't recognize. Every part of my body screamed with pain, but my back was the worst. I tried to move and couldn't. Even breathing hurt. A healer named Maeve was sitting beside my bed. She looked at me with pity and something else, something that might have been guilt. "Don't try to move," she said gently. "You're lucky to be alive. The wounds on your back should have killed you, but your wolf is strong. She's fighting to heal you, but it's slow because of the ceremonial whip." "Where am I?" My voice was barely a whisper. "Cormac's house. You're in the mate quarters. He's decided that despite your defiance, he'll still honor his claim. You're to be his mate once you're well enough for the marking ceremony." "No." I tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as pain exploded through my body. "No, I won't. I'll refuse again. I'll run again." Maeve's expression was sad. "Aisling, you can't refuse anymore. Pack law is clear. You refused once, you were disciplined. And now the alpha's claim stands regardless of your consent. If you try to refuse again or run again, the punishment will be death. Not just for you, but for anyone who helps you. That's not fair. That's not right. Maybe not. But it's the law. It's the way things have always been. Then the law needs to change. Perhaps. But not today. Today you need to heal. And you need to accept your situation." I couldn't accept it. I wouldn't. But for those first few days, I was too weak to do anything but lie in that bed and hurt. Cormac visited twice a day, sometimes just watching me sleep, other times talking to me about our future together as if he hadn't nearly killed me. "You'll learn to be happy," he told me once. "Once you accept that you're mine, once you stop fighting it, you'll see that I can give you everything. Power, protection, status. You'll be the alpha's mate, second only to the pack leader's mate in authority. Other wolves will bow to you." "I don't want any of that," I said. "I just want to be free. Freedom is overrated. Security is what matters. Order. Knowing your place in the world. My place shouldn't be as your prisoner." His hand shot out and gripped my chin, forcing me to look at him. "You're not my prisoner. You're my mate. There's a difference. And the sooner you understand that, the easier this will be for both of us." But I did feel like a prisoner. The room had no windows I could open, and the door was locked from the outside. Maeve brought me food and helped me with things I was too weak to do myself, but she wouldn't help me escape. No one would. They were all too afraid of Cormac and too bound by pack law. Took 2 weeks before I could stand without screaming. 3 weeks before I could walk more than a few steps. The scars on my back were permanent, the healer told me. They would fade with time but never completely disappear. I would carry the mark of my defiance for the rest of my life. As my body slowly healed, my mind was working furiously. I couldn't fight Cormac physically. I couldn't run because they'd catch me again. I couldn't appeal to pack law because pack law was what had put me in this situation. So I needed a different approach. I needed information. And I needed allies. I started by being more cooperative with Maeve. I asked her questions about Cormac, about his history, about his family. I learned that his mother, Fiona, was the gentlest person in the pack, completely opposite to her son and husband. I learned that Cormac had a younger sister named Emmer who had left the pack years ago under mysterious circumstances. And I learned about Niamh, my predecessor in Cormac's affections. What happened to her? I asked one day while Maeve was changing the bandages on my back. The girl he was with before. Niamh. Where did she go? Maeve's hands paused for a moment before continuing their work. That's not something we talk about. Please. I need to know what I'm dealing with. What he's capable of. She was quiet for a long moment, and then she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. Niamh challenged him once. Just once. She questioned his decision about something. I don't even remember what. He broke her jaw. When she tried to leave, he tracked her down and brought her back. The next time she tried, she made sure no one could follow. She left in the middle of the night with just the clothes on her back, and she never contacted anyone from the pack again. Some say she killed herself. Others say she found a way to completely sever her pack bonds and disappear. The way she's gone. And she's not coming back. And everyone just accepted that. What choice did we have? Cormac is the alpha heir. His father is pack leader. They make the rules. That has to change. Maybe. But it won't be easy. And it won't be safe. She was right about that. But lying in that bed, scarred and broken and trapped, I made myself a promise. I would find a way to break free. And I would make sure Cormac never hurt anyone else the way he'd hurt me. My opportunity came sooner than expected. After 4 weeks, I was deemed healed enough for the marking ceremony. This was different from the mating ceremony. This was when Cormac would bite me, marking me as his mate permanently, creating a bond that would make it nearly impossible for me to leave him. The mark would tie us together, letting him feel my emotions and location at all times. The ceremony was scheduled for the next full moon, which gave me 2 weeks to figure out my plan. I started by being the perfect, compliant future mate. I stopped fighting when Cormac visited. I nodded and smiled and pretended to accept my fate. He was suspicious at first, but gradually he began to believe my act. His visits became longer, his guard dropped slightly, and he started telling me things. About pack politics, about his plans for the future, about his father's declining health and his own inevitable rise to pack leader. And he told me about the pack vault. Every werewolf pack has one, a secure location where they keep their most important artifacts, documents and treasures. Ours was kept in a hidden room beneath the pack leader's house, and Cormac had access to it as the heir. He mentioned it casually one day, bragging about the ancient weapons and ceremonial objects stored there. But what caught my attention was when he mentioned the old pack records. Centuries of documentation about pack law, traditions, and precedents. Including, he said with a laugh, some truly barbaric punishments that modern packs no longer used. That's when I got my idea. If pack law was what had trapped me, maybe pack law could also free me. There had to be something in those old records, some precedent or rule that I could use. So I needed to get into that vault. I waited until 5 days before the marking ceremony. Cormac had become confident enough in my compliance that he started leaving me alone for hours at a time. The door to my room was still locked, but I'd been watching Maeve carefully and had figured out where she kept the key. One night, when everyone was asleep, I picked the simple lock using a bent hairpin, exactly the way Dara had taught me years ago when we were teenagers. The memory made my heart ache, but I pushed it aside. I couldn't think about him now. Had to focus. The pack leader's house was dark and quiet. I moved through it like a ghost, my wolf senses helping me avoid the guards. I'd always been light on my feet, and 4 weeks of recovering in bed had taught me patience and caution. Finding the vault entrance took longer than I expected. It was hidden behind a bookshelf in Finian's study, and I only found it because I remembered Cormac mentioning that his father loved old books. A specific book, when pulled, triggered the mechanism that swung the shelf aside. The vault itself was protected by a combination lock, but I'd watched Cormac's hands carefully when he'd absent-mindedly fiddled with his keyring, showing me the numbers. He was arrogant enough to think I'd never dare to use the information. The vault was smaller than I expected but packed with history. Ancient weapons lined one wall. Ceremonial objects I didn't recognize filled another. And along the back wall were shelves upon shelves of old leather-bound books and scrolls. I didn't have much time, so I worked quickly, scanning through the oldest records I could find. Most of it was exactly what I expected. Documentation of ceremonies, lists of pack members, records of territorial disputes. But then, in a book dated back almost 300 years, I found something interesting. It was a section on pack law regarding forced matings. And buried in the archaic language, I found a loophole so old that no one had thought about it in centuries. According to ancient pack law, an alpha could claim any unmated wolf of appropriate rank. But the law also stated that if the claimed wolf could prove they were already bonded to another through a blood oath, the alpha's claim was void. The blood oath was an old tradition where 2 wolves would literally mix their blood and swear binding vows to each other, creating a bond that predated and superseded any other claim. The catch was that the blood oath had to be performed before the alpha's claim was made. And it had to be witnessed by at least one other pack member who could verify its authenticity. My heart was racing as I read through the details. This was it. This was the way out. But I'd made no blood oath with Dara, and he was long gone. So this information was useless. Or was it? I kept reading, searching for anything else I could use, and then I found another interesting passage. It dealt with alphas who were found to be unfit for mating due to proven patterns of abuse. If 3 separate incidents of excessive violence toward pack members could be documented and verified, the alpha could be stripped of their mating rights entirely. 3 incidents. Niev was 1. I was 2. I just needed one more. I spent the next hour searching through more recent records, looking for anything about Cormac's past. And I found it in a disciplinary record from 8 years ago, before Niev, before me. A female beta named Sierra had filed a complaint against Cormac for assault during a territorial patrol. She'd been hospitalized with severe injuries. But the complaint had been dismissed by pack leader Finian, citing lack of evidence and claiming the injuries were sustained during a legitimate confrontation with rogues. 3 incidents. 3 women. And I was willing to bet that if I dug deeper, I'd find more. But having the information wasn't enough. I needed to present it to the Pack Council in a way that they couldn't ignore. And I needed to do it before the marking ceremony, because once Cormac's mark was on me, it would be exponentially harder to break free. I carefully photographed the relevant pages using a phone I'd stolen from Maeve's pocket earlier. Then I returned everything to its place and closed the vault. I was back in my room with the door locked behind me less than 2 hours after I'd left. The next morning, I asked Maeve if I could write a letter to my mother. I wanted to reconcile with her before the marking ceremony, I said. Maeve, pleased that I was finally accepting my fate, agreed and brought me paper and a pen. But instead of writing to my mother, I wrote to every member of the Pack Council. Formal letters, carefully worded, citing the ancient laws I discovered and requesting an emergency council session to review Cormac's fitness as an alpha mate. I included references to the old records and mentioned that I had documentation of multiple incidents of excessive violence. Maeve was horrified when she discovered what I'd done. She'd already sent the letters before reading them, trusting that they were innocent notes to my family. By the time she realized her mistake, it was too late. The council had received my petition, and according to Pack law, they had to address it. Cormac's rage when he found out was terrifying. He stormed into my room with murder in his eyes. "What have you done?" he roared. "You stupid, ungrateful." "I invoked my rights under ancient Pack law," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm even though I was shaking. "I've petitioned the council to review your fitness as a mate. They have to hear my case. That's the law." "The law?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think the law will save you? My father leads that council. They'll dismiss your petition in minutes. Maybe. But they have to hear it first. And everyone will know why. Everyone will hear about Sierra and Niev and what you did to me. They'll see the patterns. They'll see what you really are." His hand was around my throat before I could blink, slamming me against the wall. "You're playing a very dangerous game, Aisling. Even if by some miracle the council sides with you, do you really think I'll just let you go? Mine. That's not going to change." "Kill me then," I choked out. "Because that's the only way you'll keep me." For a moment, I genuinely thought he would. His fingers tightened, cutting off my air completely. But then someone knocked on the door. "Cormac." It was his father's voice, cold and commanding. "Release her and come out here. Now." Cormac dropped me, and I collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. He leaned down close to my ear. "This isn't over," he whispered. Then he left, slamming the door behind him. I sat on the floor for a long time, trying to stop shaking, trying to believe that I'd actually survive this. I'd rolled the dice. Now I just had to hope they landed in my favor. The council session was scheduled for 3 days later, just 2 days before the marking ceremony. Those 3 days were the longest of my life. I was confined to my room completely now, with guards posted outside to make sure I couldn't run or contact anyone. But I could hear things. Arguments. Raised voices. The pack was in turmoil. Some supported me apparently. Word had spread about my petition, and it had opened old wounds. Other women started coming forward with stories about Cormac, about his father, about other alphas who thought their rank gave them the right to hurt people. It was becoming bigger than just me and Cormac. It was becoming a referendum on Pack law itself. But the traditionalists were fighting back hard. They argued that I was a troublemaker trying to destroy Pack unity. That I was making false accusations because I wanted to be with a beta instead of accepting an alpha's rightful claim. That if my petition succeeded, it would open the floodgates to chaos, with every unmated wolf refusing legitimate pairings. The day of the council session, they brought me to the Pack meeting hall in chains. Actual silver chains that burned my wrists and made my wolf whimper. It was meant to humiliate me, to show everyone that I was a criminal rather than a petitioner with legitimate grievances. The meeting hall was packed. Apparently the council had decided to make this a public session, which could work in my favor or destroy me completely. I searched the crowd and saw my mother crying, saw Siobhan looking terrified, saw Maeve watching with guilty eyes. And I saw Cormac, sitting beside his father at the head of the room, looking absolutely confident that this would end in his favor. The council consisted of 7 of the Pack's eldest and most respected members, including Pack leader Finian. They sat at a long table, and I stood before them in my chains like a prisoner awaiting judgment. Finian spoke first. Aisling Brennan, you have invoked ancient pack law to petition this council regarding the fitness of Alpha Cormac O'Sullivan to claim you as his mate. This is an extremely serious accusation with far-reaching consequences. Before we hear your evidence, you must understand that if this council finds your petition to be without merit, the punishment will be severe. Do you understand? I understand, I said. My voice only shook a little. Then present your case. I'd rehearsed this moment 100 times in my head, but now that it was here, I felt the weight of all those eyes on me. This was my one chance. If I failed, I was doomed. If I succeeded, I might actually survive this. Honorable council members, I began. I come before you citing the ancient law documented in the pack records from the year 1723. That law states that an alpha proven to have a pattern of excessive violence toward pack members can be deemed unfit for mating rights. I have evidence of 3 separate incidents where Alpha Cormac O'Sullivan has seriously injured or permanently damaged female pack members. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Finian's face darkened, but he gestured for me to continue. The first incident occurred 8 years ago. A beta female named Sierra was hospitalized with severe injuries after a patrol with Alpha Cormac. While the official report claimed her injuries were from a rogue attack, witnesses at the time reported seeing Cormac alone with Sierra before she was found. Sierra left the pack shortly after and has never returned. The second incident involves a female named Niamh, who was in a relationship with Cormac 3 years ago. Multiple pack members witnessed her with unexplained bruises and injuries during their relationship. She disappeared suddenly and has not been heard from since, leading many to believe she either took her own life or fled in fear. The third incident is my own experience. 28 days ago, I received 50 lashes with a ceremonial whip, delivered by Cormac himself, for refusing his mating claim. While this was technically lawful punishment, the severity nearly killed me. Additionally, Cormac attacked and permanently injured Beta Dara Quinn that same night, breaking multiple bones in what was described as a challenge but was actually retaliation for my friendship with Dara. I pulled out the printed photographs I'd managed to keep hidden. I have documentation from the pack vault records showing Sierra's original complaint before it was dismissed. I have 3 witnesses willing to testify about Niamh's injuries. And I have my own scars as evidence of excessive violence. Before anyone could stop me, I turned around and lifted my shirt, exposing my back to the entire assembly. The scars from the whipping were raised and angry, crisscrossing my skin in a permanent testament to that night. I heard gasps throughout the crowd. Finian's voice was ice. Cover yourself. You've made your point. I lowered my shirt and turned back to face the council. These are not isolated incidents. This is a pattern of an alpha who believes his rank gives him the right to brutalize anyone who displeases him. If Cormac is allowed to claim me as his mate, I will become his next victim. And there will be others after me. The ancient law exists precisely to prevent alphas like this from having unchecked power over their mates. Cormac stood up, his face a mask of controlled fury. These are lies and distortions. Sierra was injured by rogues, as documented. Niamh left of her own free will because she wanted to pursue a life outside the pack. And Aisling's punishment was lawfully administered according to pack tradition after she committed a serious offense. If anything, her petition here proves that she's a troublemaker who refuses to accept legitimate authority. Then let's hear from witnesses, I said quickly before Finian could shut me down. Let Sierra testify if you can find her. Let's ask Niamh what really happened if anyone knows where she is. And let's ask Maeve the healer exactly how close to death I came after my lawful punishment. One of the council members, an elderly female alpha named Deirdre, spoke up. The girl raises valid points. If these accusations are false, they should be easy to disprove. I move that we hear testimony from relevant witnesses before making our decision. Finian looked like he wanted to refuse, but pack law was clear. If a council member called for witness testimony, it had to be granted. Fine. We'll adjourn for 2 hours while witnesses are summoned. Aisling Brennan will be returned to confinement. Those 2 hours felt like an eternity. I sat in a small holding room, still in chains, trying not to let hope get the better of me. I'd presented my case, but the council was still dominated by traditionalists who supported Cormac and his father. The chances of them ruling in my favor seemed impossibly small. When they brought me back, the meeting hall was even more crowded than before. Word had spread throughout the territory, and it seemed like half the pack had shown up to watch. Maeve was called first. She looked terrified as she stood before the council, but when asked about my injuries, she told the truth. Aisling's wounds were the most severe I've seen from a ceremonial whipping in my 30 years as a pack healer. She should have died. Her wolf was exceptionally strong, which is the only reason she survived. In my professional opinion, 50 lashes was excessive for the offense of refusing a mating claim. But was it within the bounds of pack law? Finian pressed. Maeve hesitated. Technically, yes. But pack law gives the administrator discretion on severity. Cormac chose the maximum punishment possible. Next they called forward 3 she-wolves who had been friends with Niamh. All 3 testified about the bruises they'd seen, the excuses Niamh had made, the fear in her eyes whenever Cormac was mentioned. One of them, a beta named Orla, started crying as she spoke. I should have done something, Orla said. I should have helped her. But I was afraid. We were all afraid. Cormac made it clear that anyone who interfered would regret it. The night before Niamh disappeared, she came to my house. She showed me burns on her arms and a broken finger. She said Cormac had done it because she'd embarrassed him at a pack gathering. She begged me to help her escape. I gave her money and my car keys. That was the last time I saw her. The crowd was murmuring now, shock and anger mixing in their voices. Even some of the traditionalists looked uncomfortable. These are all just stories, Cormac said, his voice loud enough to carry across the hall. Accusations without proof. Niamh was unstable. Everyone knew that. And these females are clearly conspiring with Aisling to undermine me. Then where is Niamh? Deirdre asked sharply. If she left voluntarily and happily as you claim, why has no one heard from her in 3 years? Why hasn't she contacted her family or friends? I don't know. That's not my responsibility. But she was your girlfriend. Didn't you look for her when she disappeared? Cormac's jaw tightened. I assumed she wanted to be left alone. I respected her choice. How convenient, Deirdre said dryly. Then something happened that I never expected. The doors at the back of the hall opened, and a woman walked in. She was thin, almost frail, with short-cropped hair and haunted eyes. But I recognized her from photographs. 'Twas Niamh. The entire hall went silent. Even Cormac looked shocked. Niamh walked slowly down the center aisle, and I could see she was limping. When she reached the council table, she spoke in a quiet voice that somehow carried through the entire space. My name is Niamh O'Brien. I left this pack 3 years ago after Cormac O'Sullivan nearly beat me to death. I have documentation from the hospital 3 towns over where I was treated for multiple broken bones, internal bleeding, and severe trauma. I would have come forward sooner, but I was terrified. I still am. But when I heard what was happening here, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. I can't let him do to Aisling what he did to me. She turned to face Cormac directly. You told me you loved me. You told me I was yours forever. And then you spent 2 years slowly destroying me, piece by piece, until I barely recognized myself. The night I finally escaped, you broke 3 of my ribs, fractured my skull, and told me that if I ever tried to leave, you would hunt me down and finish the job. So I ran. I changed my name, I broke every pack bond one had, and I spent 3 years looking over my shoulder, waiting for you to find me. Cormac's face had gone pale, then red, then pale again. You're lying. You're working with Aisling to destroy me. I've never met Aisling before today, Niamh said. But I heard about what happened to her. About the whipping. About how you nearly killed her just like you nearly killed me. And I realized that if I didn't speak up, There would be others. You'll never stop, Cormac. Not unless someone makes you. She pulled out a folder and handed it to Deirdre. These are my medical records from 3 years ago. Hospital documentation, photographs of my injuries, a police report I filed in the human town where I went for help. It's all there. Deirdre opened the folder, and her face grew darker as she reviewed the contents. She passed it to the other council members, and I watched their expressions change from skepticism to shock to disgust. Finian tried to maintain control. These documents could be fabricated. We have no way to verify. I can verify them, said a new voice from the crowd. An older man stood up, someone I didn't recognize. My name is Dr. Sean Murphy. I'm a physician in the human town of Kilmaco. 3 years ago, a young woman came to my emergency room with injuries consistent with severe assault. She was terrified, barely conscious, and it was clear she was running from something. I treated her injuries and helped her file a police report. That woman was Niamh O'Brien. I've kept copies of her records because her case haunted me. When I heard about this council session, I felt compelled to come forward. The hall erupted in voices. Everyone was talking at once, shock and anger rippling through the crowd. Finian was trying to call for order, but he'd lost control of the room. Cormac stood up, his chair falling backward with a crash. This is a conspiracy. They're all lying. My father, you have to stop this. But Finian was staring at Niamh's medical records, and for the first time, he looked uncertain. Even he couldn't ignore this much evidence. Deirdre's voice cut through the chaos. I've seen enough. 3 documented incidents, multiple witnesses, medical evidence, and a pattern of escalating violence. By the ancient law that Aisling Brennan has invoked, I move that Cormac O'Sullivan be deemed unfit to claim any mate until he undergoes extensive counselling and demonstrates genuine reform. Furthermore, I move that Aisling Brennan's refusal of his claim be officially recognised as valid, and that she be released from any obligation to him. I second the motion, said another council member immediately. As do I, said a third. Finian looked around the table and seemed to realise he was outnumbered. 4 of the 7 council members had already voted against his son. If he pushed for a full vote, Cormac would lose. This is not over, Finian said, his voice deadly quiet. We will adjourn to discuss this matter privately before making any final decisions. There's nothing to discuss, Deirdre said firmly. The law is clear. The evidence is overwhelming. Unless you want to openly disregard pack law in front of the entire assembly, the decision is already made. The tension in the hall was electric. This was more than just my case now. This was a power struggle between the old guard and those who wanted change. And everyone was waiting to see which side would win. Finally, Finian spoke. Very well. By a majority vote of the council, Cormac O'Sullivan is temporarily stripped of his mating rights pending counselling and evaluation. Aisling Brennan's refusal is recognised as valid. The marking ceremony is cancelled. The hall exploded in reaction. Some cheered. Others shouted in protest. Cormac looked like he was going to attack someone, his entire body vibrating with barely controlled rage. Guards moved closer to him, ready to restrain him if necessary. Someone unlocked my chains, and I nearly collapsed as they fell away. My wrists were raw and bleeding from the silver, but I'd never felt more free in my life. Niamh approached me, and we looked at each other for a long moment. Then she hugged me and we both started crying. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for coming back. I know how hard that must have been. Thank you for being brave enough to fight, she said. For both of us. But our moment was interrupted by a roar of pure fury. Cormac had shifted, his massive black wolf breaking free from the guards who tried to hold him. He was going to attack, consequences be damned. Everything happened in slow motion. I saw Cormac's wolf launch toward me, jaws open, ready to kill. I saw guards shifting to intercept. I saw Finian shouting orders. And then another wolf, silver-grey and fierce, slammed into Cormac from the side, knocking him off course. The two wolves rolled across the floor, snarling and snapping, and when they separated, I saw who had saved me. It was Emmer, Cormac's younger sister, who had left the pack years ago. She'd come back. The siblings faced each other, and Emmer's voice rang out in our minds through the pack bond. No more, Cormac. No more victims. No more violence. You end this now, or I'll end you. You abandoned this pack, Cormac snarled back. You have no authority here. I left because of you. Because you made my life hell just like you did to Niamh and Aisling. But I'm still pack, and I still have the right to challenge you when you break our laws. What followed was a fight that would be talked about for years. Brother against sister, alpha against alpha, because Emmer had clearly come into her full alpha power while she'd been away. She was smaller than Cormac but faster, and she fought with a fury born of years of suppressed rage. The pack formed a circle around them, and even Finian couldn't stop it now. This was an official challenge, witnessed by the entire pack, and it had to play out. The fight lasted almost 20 minutes. Both wolves were bleeding, both were exhausted, but neither would yield. Finally, Emmer got her jaws around Cormac's throat, and she had him pinned. She could have killed him. Everyone watching knew it. One bite, one twist, and Cormac O'Sullivan would be dead. But she didn't. She held him there until he finally submitted, his wolf going limp in acknowledgement of defeat. When they both shifted back to human form, Emmer stood over her brother's bleeding body and spoke to the entire assembly. I left this pack because I couldn't stand by and watch my brother become a monster. But leaving didn't stop him. It just meant I wasn't here to protect his victims. I'm back now and things are going to change. Cormac, you're done terrorizing this pack. If you ever threaten or harm another pack member, I will finish what I started here today. Do you understand? Cormac could barely speak through his injuries, but he managed a bitter yes. Emmer turned to the council. I invoke my right to reclaim my place in this pack. And I formally challenge the current leadership structure that allowed this to happen. The hall went silent again. No one had expected this. Emmer wasn't just returning. She was staging a coup. Finian looked like he'd aged 10 years in the last hour. Emmer, you don't know what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing, father. I'm making sure no other woman in this pack suffers the way Niamh, Aisling, Sierra, and countless others have suffered. I'm making sure that pack law protects everyone, not just the strong. And if that means challenging you for pack leadership, then that's what I'll do. The next few days were chaos. Emmer did challenge her father for pack leadership, citing his failure to protect pack members and his willingness to overlook his son's crimes. The pack split almost down the middle, with the younger generation and most of the females supporting Emmer, while the traditionalists backed Finian. The leadership challenge was scheduled for the next full moon, which gave both sides time to prepare. In the meantime, I was finally truly free. No more chains, no more confinement, no more Cormac. I visited Dara. It took me 3 days to work up the courage to make the drive to the city where he'd gone. When I finally knocked on his apartment door, he opened it and just stared at me for a long moment. He'd healed mostly. He still walked with a slight limp, and I knew from the way he moved that some of his injuries would never fully recover. But he was alive and he was safe, and the moment our eyes met, I knew he'd forgiven me. I'm so sorry, I said, tears streaming down my face. I'm so sorry for everything that happened to you because of me. He pulled me into his arms, and we stood there in his doorway, holding each other and crying. It wasn't your fault, he whispered. None of it was your fault. You were so brave, Aisling. So incredibly brave. We talked for hours. I told him everything that had happened with the council, with Niamh and Emmer, with the challenge for pack leadership. He told me about his new life in the city, about the job he'd found doing carpentry, about the small community of packless wolves he'd discovered. Come with me, he said finally. Stay here. We can start that life we planned together. I wanted to say yes. Part of me wanted nothing more than to leave the pack behind forever and build a simple, peaceful life with Dara. But another part of me knew I couldn't. Not yet. I have to go back, I said. At least until the leadership challenge is resolved. Emmer needs support. And there are other women in the pack who need to see that we can fight back, that we can change things. If I run now, it sends the message that the only option is escape. I need to stay and help make the pack into something better. Dara understood, even though I could see it hurt him. When you're ready then. When it's safe. I'll be here. We spent one more night together before I drove back to pack territory. It wasn't the reunion we'd dreamed of, but it was a promise. A someday that felt actually possible now. The full moon came, and with it the leadership challenge. The entire pack gathered at the stone circle where this had all begun, where I'd been whipped and broken and nearly killed. But tonight was different. Tonight was about justice. Finian and Emmer faced each other in the center of the circle. Father versus daughter. Old way versus new. It should have been an easy fight. Finian was older, more experienced, and had spent decades leading the pack. But Emmer was fighting for something bigger than herself. She was fighting for every woman who'd been hurt, every wolf who'd been silenced, every pack member who'd suffered under unjust laws. And that gave her a strength that Finian couldn't match. The fight was brutal but decisive. Emmer won not just through physical dominance but through sheer force of will. When Finian finally submitted, it felt like the entire pack let out a breath they'd been holding for years. Emmer O'Sullivan became our new pack leader that night. Her first act was to formally recognize my petition and declare that forced matings were no longer acceptable under any circumstances. Her second was to establish a council specifically dedicated to protecting vulnerable pack members. Her third was to banish Cormac from pack territory for 5 years, until he could prove he'd genuinely changed. I watched Cormac leave pack lands 3 days later. He looked diminished somehow, no longer the terrifying alpha who'd dominated my nightmares. Just a broken man who'd lost everything because he couldn't control his own violence. Niamh decided to stay with the pack. After years of running and hiding, she said she wanted to be part of building something better. We became friends, bonded by shared trauma and shared victory. Emmer offered me a position on her new council, but I declined. I'd done what I needed to do. I'd fought my battle and won. Now I wanted the peaceful life I'd been denied. 6 months after the leadership challenge, I left the pack officially. Not in shame or fear, but with Emmer's blessing and the support of friends who understood. I moved to the city where Dara was waiting, and we finally started the life we'd planned so long ago. We never performed a blood oath or a mating ceremony. We didn't need ancient rituals to know we belonged together. We built our life slowly, carefully, creating something based on choice and love rather than obligation and fear. The scars on my back never fully faded. Sometimes I still have nightmares about that night in the stone circle, about the whip and the pain and the helplessness. But I also dream about what came after. About finding my voice. About refusing to be broken. About changing an entire pack's laws because I refused to accept that might makes right. 3 years later, Emmer invited me back to the pack to speak at the annual gathering. She wanted me to tell my story to the younger generation, to show them that courage doesn't mean not being afraid. It means being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. I stood in that stone circle again, but this time I wasn't bound or beaten or silenced. This time I spoke with the authority of someone who'd survived hell and come out stronger. I said no, I told them. I said no to an alpha's claim because saying yes would have destroyed me. And they punished me for it. They whipped me until I couldn't walk, until I couldn't think, until I wanted to die. But I survived. And more than that, I fought back. Not with violence or revenge, but with truth and law and the courage to demand better. I looked around at all those young faces watching me. If you learn nothing else from my story, learn this. Your worth is not determined by your rank. Your voice matters, even when everyone tells you to be silent. And no one, no matter how powerful, has the right to break you. Fight for yourselves. Fight for each other. And never accept that cruelty is just the way things are. The crowd erupted in applause, and I saw tears on many faces. Emmer hugged me tight afterward and whispered, "You changed everything, Aisling. You know that, right?" You changed everything. Maybe I did. Or maybe I was just the spark that lit a fire that was waiting to burn. Either way, the pack was different now. Better. Safer. And while I chose not to stay, I was proud of what we'd built together. I'm 30 years old now, and I live a quiet life in the city with Dara. We have a small apartment filled with his wooden sculptures and my books. We have friends from the Packless community who've become like family. We have peace and safety, and love that was chosen freely rather than forced. Sometimes former pack members visit. Young wolves who are struggling with their place in the hierarchy, or dealing with abuse, or trying to figure out if they should stay or go. I talk to them, share my story, and remind them that they have choices. Always choices. The other night I got a letter from the pack. It was from a young Omega named Saoirse who'd been in the crowd when I spoke 3 years ago. She wrote to tell me that she just refused an Alpha's claim, citing the precedent I'd set. And instead of being punished, the Pack Council had supported her decision. The Alpha had been required to accept her refusal without retaliation. Your courage gave me courage, she wrote. You showed me it was possible to say no and survive. Thank you for fighting so I wouldn't have to fight as hard. I cried when I read that letter. Because that's why it was all worth it. The pain, the fear, the scars I'll carry forever. All of it was worth it if it meant the next generation could say no without being destroyed for it. My story doesn't have a fairy tale ending. I'm not a pack leader or a legendary hero. I'm just someone who refused to accept that violence and cruelty were inevitable. Someone who said no when everyone expected yes. Someone who survived. And sometimes, survival is the greatest victory of all. Dara and I talk sometimes about going back to the pack. Maybe someday when enough time has passed, when the wounds are fully healed. But for now, we're happy here in our chosen life, far from the stone circles and ancient laws. I still dream about Cormac occasionally. In my dreams, he's still the terrifying Alpha who nearly destroyed me. But then I wake up next to Dara, safe and free, and I remember, Cormac lost. I won. And that makes all the difference. The world is changing slowly but surely. More packs are adopting reforms like the ones Emmer instituted. More wolves are speaking up about abuse and injustice. More voices are joining the chorus of those who refuse to accept that power gives anyone the right to hurt others. I'm proud to have been part of that change. I'm proud that I said no, even when it nearly killed me. Because some things are worth fighting for, even when the cost is impossibly high. My name is Aisling Brennan. I was whipped, beaten, and nearly broken by an Alpha who thought he owned me. But I survived, fought back, I won. And if my story helps even one person find the courage to say no, to stand up, to demand better, then every scar was worth it.